Hey folks, Arthur here, and welcome back to the channel. Picture this, the price of that new car you've been eyeing drops by a few $100s. Next week, it's even cheaper. Your grocery bill shrinks, gas prices tumble, and that fancy new smartphone is suddenly on a massive sale. On the surface, it sounds like an absolute dream come true, right? A world where your money is constantly becoming more powerful. But I'm here to tell you that this seemingly perfect scenario is actually an economist's worst nightmare. It has a name: deflation. And it's not some abstract theory, it has a silent economic killer. During the Great Depression, a brutal wave of deflation saw the wholesale price index in America collapse by a staggering 33%. This wasn't a holiday sale, it was a symptom of a catastrophic breakdown that helped throw millions out of work and brought the global economy to its knees. So what gives? How can something that feels like a personal financial victory be a recipe for national disaster? The answer lies in a strange quirk of human psychology. Think about it. If you knew that car, or that phone, or even a new house would be 10% cheaper in just a few months, what would you do? You'd wait, of course. It's the logical choice. But what happens when everyone waits? What happens when an entire country full of consumers and businesses all decide to put their wallets away and hold onto their cash, expecting better deals tomorrow? That's when the dominoes start to fall. Businesses see their sales evaporate. To survive, they cut production. Then they cut wages. And then, the layoffs begin. This creates a terrifying, self-feeding vortex called a deflationary spiral, where falling prices lead to lower demand, which leads to even lower prices, and on it goes, sucking the life out of the economy. In today's episode, we are pulling back the curtain on this misunderstood economic threat. We'll explore the hidden mechanics of why falling prices can be far more dangerous than rising ones. Look at real-world examples of countries caught in deflation's grip and unpack the desperate measures governments take to fight it. So grab a seat, because understanding this concept is key to understanding how our entire modern economy stays afloat. You'll never look at a sale sign the same way again. 1. The waiting game. So, how does this waiting game actually begin? It starts with a simple, poisonous thought that embeds itself in the mind of an entire nation. Why buy today what I can get for cheaper tomorrow? It's not greed. It's basic logic. But when millions of people apply that same logic, it becomes a powerful, paralyzing force that starves the economy of its most vital nutrient: spending. This isn't just a textbook theory, it's the real-life horror story of Japan in the 1990s. After a massive stock market and real estate bubble burst in 1990, Japan slid into a period of economic stagnation so profound it's now grimly known as the Lost Decade. Prices stopped rising, then they began to fall. And for years, they just kept falling. What did the Japanese people do? Exactly what you or I would do. They saw the prices of cars, electronics, and homes slowly ticking downward. And they decided to wait. This wasn't a short-term sale, it became a permanent state of mind. A deflationary psychology that gripped the country. Consumers tightened their purse strings, confident that their cash would be more valuable next month or next year. The result was catastrophic. Businesses watched their sales forecasts collapse. A company planning to sell 100,000 cars suddenly found buyers for only 60,000. Their parking lots overflowed with unsold inventory. To move the product, they had no choice but to cut prices even further. which only reinforced the public's decision to wait for even better deals. This created a vicious feedback loop. To cope with falling prices and vanishing profits, companies had to slash costs. That meant freezing new investments, canceling expansion plans, and, most painfully, cutting wages and laying off staff. This, in turn, gave consumers even less money and even more anxiety about the future, causing them to delay their purchases further. It is a whirlpool from which it is incredibly difficult to escape. An even stranger phenomenon emerged from this crisis: the rise of the zombie companies. These were firms that were effectively bankrupt. They weren't making enough money to pay back the principal on their loans, only the interest. But banks, terrified of a massive wave of corporate failures that would collapse the financial system, kept lending them just enough money to stay alive, but not to grow or innovate. Imagine an entire economy clogged with these shuffling corporate zombies. They occupied market share, tied up workers, and soaked up capital that should have gone to new, healthy, innovative companies. This prevented the normal process of creative destruction, where old, inefficient firms die off to make way for the new. Instead, Japan's economy was stuck in a low-growth and ed state for years, unable to move forward. From 1991 to 2003, the Japanese economy grew by a mere 1.14% per year, a shadow of its former dynamism. For an entire generation, economic stagnation became the norm. The lost decade stretched into the lost 20 years because breaking the psychological grip of the waiting game, convincing people that prices won't be cheaper forever, proved to be one of the hardest challenges in modern economics. So the trap is set. A simple, rational individual choice to wait for a better price when multiplied by millions creates a collective nightmare of economic paralysis. It's a game where the only winning move for the individual is not to play. But when nobody plays, the entire game shuts down. 2. The debt quicksand. Now, if the waiting game creates a kind of economic paralysis, our second problem, the debt quicksand, is what turns a recession into a full-blown catastrophe. This is where deflation stops being a theoretical problem about future spending and starts actively attacking your past decisions, weaponizing every loan you've ever taken out. Here's the terrifyingly simple mechanism: when deflation hits, prices fall. Your wages probably fall too. The value of your assets, like your house or your car, also falls. But the one number that stays stubbornly, brutally fixed: the total amount of your debt. Think of it this way: your debt is written in ink, but your income and your assets are written in pencil. Deflation is the eraser that starts rubbing out the value of everything you have, while leaving the value of everything you owe perfectly untouched. Your debts don't shrink with the economy. In real terms, they grow. Let us run a quick example. Say you have a $500,000 mortgage on a house that was worth $600,000, and you earn $100,000 a year. Your debt feels manageable. But then, a nasty bout of 10% deflation hits the economy. Suddenly, your boss cuts your salary by 10% to $90,000 to keep the business afloat. The market value of your house drops 10% to $540,000. But your mortgage? It is still $500,000. That fixed payment, which was once a reasonable chunk of your paycheck, now takes a much bigger, more painful bite. You are now paying back your loan with dollars that are harder to earn and more valuable than the ones you originally borrowed. In effect, deflation forces you to climb a hill that is actively getting steeper. And if deflation continues, you could find yourself underwater, owing more on your house than it is even worth. Now, imagine this happening to millions of households and businesses all at once. People can't afford their payments. Defaults skyrocket. Homeowners walk away from their mortgages. Businesses can't service their loans and go bankrupt. This isn't just a theory, it's the nightmare that unfolded during the Great Depression. The economist Irving Fisher perfectly diagnosed this phenomenon, calling it debt deflation. He described a vicious spiral. Falling prices increase the real weight of old debts, leading to a massive wave of defaults and bankruptcies. This wave of defaults then crashed directly into the banking system. The banks that had issued these loans suddenly found their assets, the mortgages and business loans, were now worthless. The result was pure carnage. Between 1930 and 1933, more than 9,000 banks in the United States failed, wiping out the savings of millions. This wasn't a contained crisis, it was the collapse of the entire financial nervous system. Out in the heartland, the story was just as grim. Between 1929 and 1933, it's estimated that a third of all American farmers lost their land to foreclosure. Families that had worked the same soil for generations were thrown off their property because the price of their crops had collapsed. But the price of their debt had not. This is the debt deflation spiral in action. Defaults lead to bank failures. Failing banks stop lending money. A lack of lending and credit freezes the economy, causing consumer spending and business investment to plummet even further. This, of course, forces businesses to cut prices again to attract any customers at all, making the initial deflation even worse. So you see, the debt quicksand does something uniquely sinister. It doesn't just stall the economy like the waiting game. It actively punishes past prosperity and leverages the bedrock of our financial system, the ability to borrow, into a tool of its own destruction. 3. The profit paradox. So we've seen how deflation traps consumers and weaponizes debt. But what about the companies on the other side of that equation? Well, this is where the crisis gets a truly bizarre twist, creating something I call the profit paradox. Here's the trap: when prices fall across the economy, a company's revenue, the money coming in the door, shrinks right along with them. But many of its biggest costs absolutely refuse to budge. They are, as economists say, sticky downwards. Think about it. A company can't just decide to pay less for its 2-year supply contract for steel. It can't call up the landlord and say, "Hey, there's deflation, so I'm cutting my rent payment by 10%. And most importantly, it's incredibly difficult and damaging to morale to cut the nominal wages of your employees. This creates a brutal profit squeeze. The money coming in is falling, but the money going out is staying stubbornly high. During the Great Depression, this wasn't just a theory. Between 1929 and 1932, national income in the U.S. fell by over 50%, but wages for many who kept their jobs fell much more slowly. And salaries for white-collar workers were even stickier. For a business owner, this is a five-alarm fire. You're losing money on every sale. So what do? You're left with only a few terrible options to survive. First, you lay people off. It's the quickest and most direct way to slash those sticky wage costs. This, of course, throws more people out of work, who then stop spending money, which forces other businesses to cut their prices, making the whole deflationary spiral worse. Second, you stop investing. All plans for a new factory, new research, or new equipment get slammed on the brakes. Why spend money to grow your business in a world where you expect prices and your future profits to be even lower next year? During the Depression, business investment didn't just slow down, it utterly collapsed, falling by a staggering 68%. This is the profit paradox in action. In a desperate, perfectly rational attempt to save their individual businesses, corporate leaders are forced to make decisions, layoffs, and investment freezes that collectively starve the entire economy of jobs and future growth, guaranteeing that the crisis gets deeper for everyone. 4. The Fed's nightmare. So with the whole economy now in a terrifying nosedive, you're probably asking, where are the people in charge? Where are the economic firefighters at the Federal Reserve? Well, this is where the story gets truly scary. Central banks like the Fed have a clear playbook for fighting inflation that's when prices are rising too fast. They hit the brakes by raising interest rates, making it more expensive to borrow money, which cools down spending. Simple. To fight a recession and prevent deflation, they do the opposite. They slam on the gas pedal. They cut interest rates, making money cheap to borrow, encouraging everyone to spend and invest, and jolting the economy back to life. But what happens when the gas pedal is already pushed all the way to the floor? This is the Fed's ultimate nightmare, a problem economists call the zero lower bound. It happens when interest rates are already at or near zero, but the economy still won't budge. The central bank has lost its most powerful and reliable tool. They can't cut rates any further to encourage spending because people can just choose to hold physical cash, which guarantees a 0% return. The engine has stalled, and the gas pedal is useless. This isn't just a theory, we've seen it happen. For decades, Japan has been the poster child for this economic paralysis. After a massive asset bubble burst in the early 1990s, the country fell into a prolonged period of stagnation and deflation known as the lost decades. The Bank of Japan cut interest rates again and again until they hit zero in 1999. And they've stayed there for most of the time since. But the deflationary mindset was already entrenched. Even with borrowing being virtually free, companies and consumers, scarred by the crash, preferred to save their money rather than spend it. The result was decades of sluggish growth. So when you're at the zero lower bound, what can a central bank even do? They have to resort to more experimental and less effective tools, the main one being quantitative easing, or QE. This is a fancy term for creating massive amounts of new money and using it to buy government bonds and other assets from banks. The hope is that by flooding banks with cash, they lines be encouraged to lend it out. And that by buying up bonds, it will push investors into riskier assets, stimulating the economy. But there's a huge problem. You can lead a horse to water, but you can make it drink. The Fed can print trillions of dollars, but it can't force terrified banks to lend or a scared population to borrow and spend. It's like pushing on a string. And that is the ultimate terror of deflation. It's not just falling prices. It's a vicious, self-reinforcing spiral where consumers wait for lower prices, where debt becomes a crushing weight, and where business profits evaporate. It creates a crisis that can render the most powerful financial institutions in the world effectively helpless, watching from the sidelines as the economy they're supposed to protect eats itself alive. So, if this video has successfully terrified you out of ever wishing for lower prices again, do me a solid and smash that like button. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next economic autopsy. Now if you lines excuse me, this cigar's not getting any cheaper.